that's one evidence of the Hideko River. There's a jet stream that goes over out of the Arctic and flows over Greenland from the Hideko Valley inside the Hollow Earth. And it drops all that moist air coming out of the polar opening onto the Greenland ice pack. Say, what if that jet stream was flowing over Alaska instead of over Greenland? Well, Alaska would be under 2.5 miles deep of ice today. That's the reason why we have so much ice on Greenland, because all that ice and snow comes from the hollow earth, from moist air coming out of the polar opening, following that jet stream across the Arctic and falling on the Greenland ice cap.
Aloha and welcome to another show, guys. Today I have an extraordinary guest with us, Rodney Cluff. He's the author of World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow. Rodney has spent decades delving into one of the most intriguing and controversial theories out there, Hollow Earth. This idea, though unconventional, has captured the imagination of explorers, researchers, and storytellers for centuries, from ancient mythologies to modern-day expeditions. There have been whispers of hidden civilizations, polar entrances, and even an inner sun. Could the Earth be hollow? And if so, what's inside? Rodney's work not only sparked conversations around the world, but also inspired many to explore the unknown. Today, we're going to dive into the mysteries of Hollow Earth, its possible openings, and what might be hiding right beneath our feet. Whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewheres in between, I know you'll find this discussion fascinating. But before we get into it, just a quick reminder, don't forget to follow, subscribe, review, and share this episode. Your support is what keeps this show going, and we truly appreciate all of you who tune in each week. Also, check out our new Patreon, where you can get exclusive content and support this show directly. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Rodney Cluff to the show. It's that time of year again, and I've done the hard work for you by researching the top skincare products perfect for your holiday shopping. Whether you're looking to treat yourself or to find the ideal gift, I've got you covered. You can check out the links below to purchase my top Amazon product recommendations at no extra cost to you. My latest article features the top Amazon skincare products, and I'll be adding more gift ideas throughout the holiday season. So stay tuned, happy shopping, and don't forget to check back for more updates. Aloha, Rodney. Welcome to the show. I'm thrilled to dive into your fascinating work, especially your book, World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow. To kick things off, could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to embrace the idea that the Earth is hollow, and what led you to explore this controversial topic in such depth?
Well, when I was about 16, a bunch of us boys from the Mormon colonies of northern Chihuahua, Mexico, we got a job at working out on a ranch for my uncle's brother. He had a farm just across the line in New Mexico, and I remember getting back the answer from him. It had such beautiful handwriting. You can't imagine how beautiful handwriting he wrote. His name was Ralph Brown. And while I was working on that ranch, that farm, one of the co-workers that I was working with was Greg Bowman. He had just graduated as valedictorian of the high school that year. And I really admired him. And he told me that he and the boys had just listened to the farm manager's son, who had read a book called The Hollow Earth by Raymond Bernard, I suppose. And he told the boys that he thought it would be an absolute fantastic location for the Lord to hide the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And so that piqued my interest, and it stayed in the back of my mind for many years until I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. I was working for Armored Car at that time, and I saw an ad for it in I think it was an Enquirer that I picked up. So I sent off for the book, and it was like a summary of about 6 other books about the Hollow Earth. I'd never heard of the theory before, but I was really interested in what Raymond Bernard wrote, and these authors that he summarized in his book, especially the story of Olaf Jansen and his father, who were Norwegian fishermen. In about 1829, they left Stockholm, Sweden, on the last fishing voyage that they ever had. His father was a fisherman, and he came from the Lofoten Islands in the northern part of Norway. In fact, I had a person from Norway show me the genealogical records of Lofoten Islands, and we found Olaf Jansen there. So apparently that was his hometown. He later married and moved to Stockholm. And they went up there to the Lofoten Islands, and then they headed off farther into the north. They went to Spitsbergen, and then they made it through the icebergs over to Franz Joseph Islands. And they were on the northern shore of the Franz Joseph Islands when they noticed an inlet that had green grass and flowers. And it was just the beginning of summer. And the son said, "Father, many times you have told me about the chosen ones of our ancestors that migrated into the North countries. Here we are in the North. Why don't we go out through this lead in the ice towards the Northeast and see if we can visit them while we're up here?" And his father says, "Son, if you're willing to go for some adventure, let's go." So they put up their sail and they went off through this sleet in the ice towards the Northeast. And they didn't even know that the Earth is hollow. But this lead in the ice took them right through the North Polar opening, which is located near Northland, Russia. I've estimated it that located at 130 east, 85 degrees north. And this lead in the ice took them directly through the polar opening to the inside of the Earth. It took them about a month to go through the polar opening in their little sailboat. But they were able to reach the inner continent. They went along the coast until they found a big river that turned out to be the Hiddekel River that flows out of the Garden of Eden. Well, one thing that Olaf Jansen discovered, even though he was not a Christian or a Jew, they were worshipers of their ancestors. Their leader of their ancestors was Odin. He was one of the lost 10 tribes, leaders of the lost 10 tribes. And sometime around 721 BC, the lost tribes of Israel were taken captive by the Syrians, and they were taken and placed in southern Iran and northern India, where they speak Sanskrit. They were made to change their language, but then they escaped them about 35 years later. and they went over the Caucasus Mountains to settle north of the Black Sea. And I figure that in the year about 475 BC was when their leader chose a group of them from each tribe to go into the North countries. Now, all through the scriptures and the Bible, you can read about those that live in the North countries. The North countries is just a word that the scriptures describe the hollow earth. And the reason is because just like Olaf Jansen, when he was going through the North Polar opening, they had the compass, and they followed this compass. It was pointing towards the northeast, and they were just following the compass as it goes in. The polar opening just keeps pointing north. And that's because the Earth is sort of like a magnet, okay? The magnetic flux lines, they go in at the North Pole and they come out to the South Pole. But inside the Earth, their North Pole is our South Pole. And so the compass it's always following these field lines, right? So on the outside, they point to the north, but as they go in the North Polar opening, they point south, but their North Pole is actually our South Pole. So that's why they're in the North countries. And so they went up this river, this huge river, about 30 miles in diameter, and they stopped off on the coast to pick some nuts, because everything inside the hollow earth is just luxuriant, and the apples would grow as big as your head, and trees grow up to 1,000 feet tall. There's turtles that are 7 feet tall and 20 feet long that they saw. They saw a herd of elephants, mammoths, that was 75 feet tall and 120 feet long. They felt like atoms in the forest. They were taken up on a cliff where a bird that lives in our hollow earth that has a 25-foot wingspan, like one of our little airplanes. It lays an egg that is about 1.5 feet long. So they were taken in by the people there that live there. He says they are tall, from 8 feet to up to 15 feet tall, that they live up to 1,000 years with perfect health and no sickness or disease. They have no wars. They were taught their language, which is Sanskrit, which is the language of the ancient Indians of northern India and southern Iran. And they were assigned to a couple that were teachers, and they learned their language in about 1 year, and then they were taken overland in a monorail train. Now, this was 1829. We didn't have anything that was electrical back then. But their monorail train was powered by anti-gravity. And it ran on one rail over the mountains and down the valleys with just one rail on it. And they were taken to their capital city, which is the city of Eden. And that's what he found from the people that lived there. He said that they told him that their God is Jehovah. Jehovah is the God of the ancient Israelites. So I've come to the conclusion that these people that live in the hollow earth are actually the lost 10 tribes of Israel, and that they have a beautiful country there. Their capital city is built around the original Garden of Eden, where God placed our first parents, Adam and Eve. And what happened was that after he put them in the garden, he told them not to partake of the forbidden fruit, right? But Eve was tempted by a snake that was possessed by Satan, and she partook of the fruit. And God had told them if they partake of this forbidden fruit, they would have to be expelled from the garden. And so she said she gave the fruit to her husband and says, if you don't take it, I'll be expelled by myself. And you'll be a man alone in the Garden of Eden. So he didn't want to lose his wife, so he took of the fruit. And they became mortal, because before that they were immortal. They couldn't die. In fact, they couldn't have children until they partook of the forbidden fruit. So that was probably a plan that God put in place so that they would, of their own free will, make the choice, to become mortals and be able to have children and populate the planet. But God told them in the lost books of the Bible, I found where it says that God told them to go dwell in the cave of treasures after he drove them out of the garden, where they got lost. And they wandered around and prayed and asked God, help us find their way out of this place. And when they finally came out, they came out on the surface of the planet. Adam had remarked and said that when he came out, the sun came up in the morning, it burned him. It wasn't like the soft rays of the sun inside the hollow earth where the Garden of Eden is. So in the Garden of Eden, Olaf Jansen, in the city of Eden, the capital city of the hollow earth, they were taken before the great high priest, the leader of their country, whom I have come to the conclusion based on the scriptures that I have studied, that he is a descendant of David, who God placed and made his political kingdom of God here on the surface of the planet thousands of years ago. And at that time, that it was removed from the surface of the planet, it was given to the lost 10 tribes. The throne of David was by the prophet Jeremiah. He was commanded by God in Jeremiah chapter 3 to go into the north and give a message to the lost tribes before they went into the hollow earth. And I believe that that's when he also transferred the throne of David. And the political kingdom of God, the king is always chosen by a prophet. It started with the prophet Samuel, whom the people, they had lived with judges for 400 years after getting to the promised land and coming out of Egypt. And they were tired of having judges. They wanted to have a king. So God told his prophet Samuel to go choose a king. And it was King Saul. But King Saul was a kind of a disobedient guy. He didn't want to do what the prophet told him to do. And so the Lord decided to choose a different person to become king over Israel, and that was David. And his son, Solomon, built a temple for Jehovah, the most beautiful temple ever built with gold and silver and all beautiful jewels. And he had maybe the greatest kingdom in all the world at that time, because what he would do to unite his kingdom was to marry a daughter of all the surrounding kings, so that they would all be that one big happy family and they all get along, right? But God wasn't too pleased with all that. He had rather that they not corrupt the Jewish lineage with women from all these other tribes, the other countries. And I suppose that the way he did that was to lead the lost tribes into the hollow earth and preserve them as a special race for the last days. And the prophecies are that in the last days, the lost 10 tribes will come out of the north and they will expand their political kingdom of God, the outer earth, and bring the peace that God, Jesus Christ, the Creator, is the Prince of Peace, right? He doesn't promote war, and not like the warmongers that we have here on the surface of the planet. The people of the hollow earth that have actually prevented nuclear war on the surface of the planet. When we blew up Nagasaki and Hiroshima at the end of World War II, they sent out their flying saucers to outer Earth. The first one that we knocked out of the sky was there at Roswell, New Mexico, in 1947. They send out their flying saucers to as a peaceful maneuver to prevent nuclear war. There was this colonel that worked for the United States many years, and he was on Coast to Coast with George Noory when he said that the UFOs prevented nuclear war. The United States and the Soviet Union in 1966 tried to have a nuclear war. Crazy idiots. And the UFO showed up and shut down all the missiles. Dr. Stephen Greer has many expert witnesses that have come forth. And one of those witnesses was a commander of a missile base in, I think it was Wyoming. And one morning, the security guard up on ground called down to the missile silo and told him that there's this UFO just outside the gate. And right after that, all the computers went down on all of the missiles. They shut them down. Same thing happened on the next state over, that they weren't able to launch their missiles because, well, this world is part of their world too, right? And if Russia and the United States are sending missiles towards each other over the North Pole, which is what they do, some of those could go through the polar opening and explode inside of their country. So they don't want no nuclear war going on, especially since it would affect them and their health. In 2008, I was contacted by retired Colonel Billy F. Woodard. And we were planning an expedition to go to the Hollow Earth at that time. And he wanted to go. And he said that he had coordinates of where to fly in the Arctic to get there through the polar opening. So we went over to Pahrump, Nevada to visit Billy Woodard. And it was several years after our expedition leader had died from brain cancer. And so we put in, we developed another plan to try to fly up there in a, rent we're at one of those float planes that can land on the ocean, you know. So, yeah, we put together a plan. We found a guy up in Anchorage, Alaska, that was willing to hire a couple of pilots, and our plan was to go to Point Barrow, Alaska, and then head out over the ice. And I requested that we fly below the radar so that we wouldn't be detected. And but we weren't able to come up with the money. And in 2011, he flew his airplane into a mountain in Alaska, and he was killed. Plus all the people that he was taking. He was taking an ex-senator fishing with some other people, and they were going to land up there on the lake, you know, and go fishing. But something interfered with his navigation, and he was an expert bush pilot. And his friends mentioned that they thought some hanky-panky was going on, that the powers that be don't want to, they want the world to know yet that the Earth is hollow. In fact, NASA doesn't even recognize that the moon is inhabited. I'm writing now a book on the hollow moon and the evidence that our moon is inhabited. And NASA found that out before we even went there. They did a study of reports of over 400 years of astronomers seeing lights flying around on the moon, and things going on the surface of the moon that couldn't have happened by themselves. Like one astronomer saw a bridge that in a crater that was about 12 miles long, that he had never seen before when he had looked at in that crater. So how did that crater get there? And all those lights that are flying around on the moon, indicating that the moon is inhabited. Well, in 1990, my wife and I went to the UFO conference here in Phoenix, and we met their contactee, Howard Menger, who way back in the 40s, he was on his father's farm in Virginia with his brother, and he was about 8 years old at that time. They were playing out in the woods. They had some woods. His brother wanted to go back home, but he wanted to go back out in the forest more. And he comes into this clearing and hears this flying saucer that has landed. And this most beautiful woman that he had ever seen is sitting on this big rock. And she says, Howard, she calls him by name and says, we people of Venus are coming here to Earth to help you people. And we were wondering if you would be willing to help us when you grow up. And so he said, yeah. And when he grew up in his 20s, they contacted him again. And he would help them learn our customs. They would come to Earth and he would help them learn our language and our accent and how to get jobs. And then one day he asked them, well, I've helped you many years. Could you guys do a favor for me? And they said, sure. What is it? And he says, well, I'd like to go to the moon. They said, sure. Well, meet us out here side of your town in the middle, out in the middle of the night, and we'll come down and we'll take you to the moon. So he goes out there, and there's other scientists waiting there. He doesn't know where he came from or what he represented, but he knew he was a scientist. As the flying saucers came down, they got aboard and they went to the moon. He says he didn't feel any G-forces as they were taking off, because it's anti-gravity. You don't have G-forces. They control gravity. And in his book, he has a picture of when they were approaching the moon. He took a picture through the porthole of the moon. They landed on the other side of the moon, the side of the moon that we never see. Because the moon is just like a lot of other moons in the solar system that are tidally locked, and they go around the Earth like this, and you only see one side. Well, this alien base is on the other side, the side that we never see. And they landed at this alien base on the far side of the moon. He was welcomed there. He says he met people from all the planets in our solar system. Now, NASA has never admitted that they have seen any sign of life on any of the other planets or in space or on the moon even. But if all the planets are hollows, like I believe the evidence shows and is the fact, then all these people could be living in the interior worlds of all these other planets, right? We've sent out many spacecraft into space, like the Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. As they flew past Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they found that all of them have auroras. Now, the scientists claim that our aurora on Earth is caused by our sun out here. The solar wind coming from their sun, they claim, somehow gets in the magnetic field of the Earth and somehow increases accelerates towards the planet and causes the aurora lights to light up as they strike oxygen atoms in the atmosphere. But in 1981, we went to Alaska. we sold everything we had in Mexico, and we bought an airplane ticket to Fairbanks. We landed in Fairbanks, and we met a member of our church, the church there, and who gave me a job fishing in the Gulf of Alaska. And then we came back after fishing, after a good fishing season where I earned $6,000 in 2 months. And I took my whole family and we went up on the hill north of Fairbanks. It would started to get a little dark at night because all summer long it was so bright that we had to put curtains on the windows in order to sleep at night. So up there on the hill, we could see the aurora just going up like this. The radiation from the aurora is going up from the Earth towards space, okay? So that to me proves that the aurora is caused by the solar wind from the inner sun, not from our outer sun. Our outer sun, if it was caused by the solar wind from our outer sun, the radiation would be coming down from space, not going up from the Earth, okay? So even the scientists admit in the Voyager flights, as they went, for example, by Uranus, they emit in their report that the solar wind from our outer sun is not powerful enough to create the aurora on Uranus. So it must come from the planet itself. So what does that mean? That means all the planets are hollow and that they have inner suns. Now, what do the scientists say about the outer planets? That they're gaseous, okay? But if I did a calculation on all the planets, that if they have a shell of the planet that is 10% of the diameter, like we believe the Earth is, Earth has a diameter of 8,000 miles, and the shell of the planet is 800 miles from outside to the inner surface. Then if these gaseous planets had a shell that was 10% of the diameter, they would all be solid too. They would all have solid surfaces, except maybe Saturn. It would have to have like 5% of its diameter in order to be solid. But the other planets with a 10% diameter would be all solid. In fact, when we sent the astronomers to the moon in Apollo mission, they set up on Apollo 12, 13, and 14, they set up seismographs on 3 different places on the moon. And then they guided the rocket of Apollo 13, for example, and made it hit the moon. And it caused a moonquake, recorded by these seismographs. And they recorded that the waves went down in the surface of the planet about 25 miles, and then it picked up speed and went down to 60 miles and then bounced back, indicating that the moon has a shell that is 60 miles thick, which is only about 2.6 or so of the diameter of the moon, which is a lot less thinner than the shell of our planet relatively, which indicates that the moon is more dense than the Earth. The scientists had, prior to that, estimated that the Earth is more dense than the moon, that the Earth has a density of 5.5 grams per cubic centimeter, whereas the moon only 3.3. But these seismograph experiments on the moon and the rocks that they brought back from the moon having real high dense materials in them, rare earth materials like titanium, really strong metals, indicates that the moon has a more dense shell than the Earth, which it does. In my calculation, if it has a shell that is 2.6% of the diameter of the moon, would have a density of 21, more than 21 grams per centimeter, which is like the density of titanium. And so what they found on the moon hasn't been revealed to the people. NASA has never told us that their scientists discovered that the moon is hollow and that it's inhabited, and it's been inhabited for centuries. That the astronomers have reported seeing lights and activity on the moon for centuries, and they even left the sensors on the moon with the Apollo missions that could detect once in a while water coming out on the surface of the moon and creating like a cloud, and it drifts by the sensors, and they detected this water clouds on the moon. So the moon has water in its interior. And it probably most likely has an interior sun. And I think it's also inhabited within. And well, we have lots of evidence that I've written up in my book, World Top Secret, Our Earth is Hollow, which is available on Amazon.com, at my website. I talk about a lot of these things and give a list of about 14 people or groups of people that have been to the hollow earth and come back and reported what kind of planet we actually live on. It's not full of lava like the scientists tell us in schools. They don't have anybody that has gone to the core of the earth. We have lots of witnesses that have been there and returned and given their testimony, including Admiral Byrd of the United States Navy. In 1926, Richard Byrd flew with his pilot, Floyd Bennett, to Spitsbergen, where Munson was getting ready to fly his dirigible over the pole to Alaska. And Byrd wanted to be the first to fly over the pole. So he takes his airplane there and lands, and they both take off at the same time. Of course, Byrd's plane flies faster than the dirigible, and he makes it to the pole first, right? And his pilot had learned somewhere that about the hollow earth theory, and he told Byrd that, why don't we go on the other side of the pole and check out if this hole into the earth, it really exists? And Byrd agreed, and so they flew over on the other side of the pole about 85 degrees north, and they saw the hole. And they were starting to fly down in it, and they could see the sun going lower and lower on the horizon as they were going down in the hole. And he decided at that point to turn around and go back to Spitsbergen. The next year, the U.S. Navy, he got to sponsor him in a flight to the hollow earth in 1927. They flew from Alert Base, Ellesmere Island, northern Canada, which is the base closest to the polar opening. And they flew right directly through the polar opening, 1,700 miles. And in 2008, I received this manuscript in the mail from, I think it was Diane Robbins. It's a hollow earth researcher, and her friend Frank Lawrence. And his book was not published yet. It was just the manuscript. They must have copied it off the internet, off the website of the patent office, So the copyright office. So in this book by John B. Lith, he says that he was an intelligence officer for the United States before the Second World War and afterwards, and that he started investigating this one inventor that was working on a round wing aircraft that eventually was able to create a flying saucer with people from Venus with their help. The Germans during World War II also were working on flying saucer technology. A flying saucer crashed in about 1938 in Germany, and they started reverse engineering it before our crash in 1947 at Roswell. So there was kind of, the both countries were working on the same technology at the same time. And John B. Lith as an intelligence officer in his investigations said that it was the Venusians that helped both of us develop flying saucer technology. But they jimmied the technology so that they could not use it in the war effort. But after the war, many of the Germans escaped as refugees of the war into the Hollow Earth. And he tells the story of how the Germans came to know about the Hollow Earth. He says that a group of Germans were hired by the Portuguese in the 1500s to go up the Amazon and put a fort at the headwaters of the Amazon to defend against the Spaniards who the Pope had given the west side of the Andes to, and the Pope had given the east side of the Andes to the Portuguese. And they wanted them to go up there and build a fort to defend against the Spaniards. Well, to show their commitment, they burned their ships after they got up the Amazon, and but then they were attacked by these head-hunting Indians that had penned them up in this cavern. And then they couldn't get out to go back or send messages to their home country. So they formed an exploration party of their people and sent them off back into the cavern to see if they could find another way out. Well, they returned after a certain period of time, and they told them that they had found that the earth is hollow. They had come out on the inner surface where they saw the inner sun and met their cousins of the lost 10 tribes who were living there already. And these giants the reason why they're giants is because everything in the hollow earth, it grows a lot bigger because they have ideal climate and there's less gravity. Okay. So trees grow up to 1,000 feet tall. The animals are a lot bigger. The people grow a lot bigger. And because of the perfect climate, they live a lot longer than we do, 1,000 years or more. So the Germans that had founded this colony in the Mato Grosso of the western part of Brazil, years later were able to send messages back to Germany and let them know that they had found out that our earth was hollow and that they were able to contact our cousins inside the hollow earth. So at the end of World War II, when the Germans saw that they were going to lose the war, they sent an emissary to the hollow earth and they asked them if they could migrate some of their people. And they gave them the okay. They said, you can migrate, everyone except the Nazis. The Nazis could not go because they were so murderous people. He says, only condition is that you promise never to go to war again. If you come to the hollow earth, you are going to be a peaceful people. So they promised that they would be a peaceful people. And they migrated hundreds of thousands of people to the hollow earth at the end of World War II. And on my website, you can read a letter from one of the immigrants to the hollow earth. He went in a submarine. And I was given the website by a German that reported that submarine was lost. And you go to that website and you can read where they were lost. The last known location was in the eastern southern part of Greenland, off the coast of Greenland. They were told to go to a certain place underwater where there's this cavern, and go in the cavern, and it would take them into the hollow earth. And so when he got there, his name is Carl Unger. and his pilot, his Matt, the one in charge of the submarine was Hendricks Broda. He wrote a letter back to his friend who lived in the United States, who was head of the Hollow Earth Society at that time, the International Society of the Complete Earth, they called it. And his name was Tawani Schausch, and he was from Germany, and he spoke good English and good German. He received this letter from his friend Carl Unger. And the story about how I received the letter is kind of interesting. I got an email from Diane Robbins, and she says, I got this guy from Alaska that says that he has a letter from the Hollow Earth. Would you like it? I said, I sure would. She gave me the address of the guy in Alaska. His name was Joe Watson from Talkeetna, Alaska. So I write him and I said, you have a letter from somebody that migrated to the Hollow Earth, a German? I do. And then he sent it to me, and I asked him, well, how did you come by this letter? And he says, well, in about 1986, this guy named Woodard comes into town saying that he's looking on a way to go to the Hollow Earth. He wants to rent a seaplane and fly to the Hollow Earth. And that was before I was contacted by Billy Woodard. So when I was contacted by Billy Woodard, that confirmed to me Woodard's story that he actually did go to Alaska and he did try to fly to the Hollow Earth, but his plane was intercepted by United States military air jets flying out of Alert Base. And they were turned around and told to go back to Fairbanks. And when they landed, they committed them all to silence, that they weren't to speak of anything that they were trying to do or what they saw up there, because as they got close to the full opening, they could start seeing the inner sun over the horizon towards the north. But Billy, he won't shut up. He just will not commit any secrecy to the government is trying to put on us. That he's willing to tell the whole story, and his story is also a very interesting story. We went over to Pearl, Nevada to visit him, and as I mentioned before. So a lot of these people that have been to the Hollow Earth, as I mentioned on my website, there's the story of Reinhold Schmidt. Reinhold Schmidt, 1957, was buying grain in Nebraska from a grain buyer in California and having it shipped over to California. And while he was there in Nebraska along the Platte River, he saw this bright light, and he went over to see what happened. And he thought something had crashed in near the river, and he parks his car and he walks up to see what was going on. And here's this spacecraft. It wasn't a flying saucer; it was all along like a balloon, but it was looked like it was made out of shiny metal, And when he got close, the door opened and two men stepped out. One of them showed a beam of light onto him that paralyzed him momentarily, but it was to protect his body from the electromagnetic field of the craft. They invited him aboard the craft. They were working on it. Something had malfunctioned. He saw several women that were working on the navigation of the craft, and then they finished working on the craft, and they said that they had to leave, and so he stepped outside, and then the craft took up and then started off and there was a big flash of light and it was gone. Well, he goes into town, and first he wants to thought he would talk to his minister. But he was on vacation, so he couldn't talk to his minister about it. So he went to the chief of police. And the chief of police, he puts him on one phone and he's on another phone, and the town newspaper had broadcasted the flying saucer that had landed just outside this city of town of Kearney, Nebraska. Pretty soon the Air Force colonels are showing up and asking him if he would like to go to the mental hospital in the next town. So they tried to convince him that he was mentally unstable, and finally his boss caught up with him and found where he was in the hospital and told him he was fine, he was completely sane, let him go. And so they let him out, and he was picked up by these people that was flying in this craft. He thought they were from Saturn, but I'm certain that they were probably from the Hollow Earth, because he says that some of them spoke with a German accent, and the Germans had already immigrated to the Hollow Earth, so maybe that could be the reason. But the Germans are also descendants of the Lost Tribes. When the Lost Tribes went into the North Countries, they left only a chosen group went, okay, and they left behind a bunch of the Lost Tribes in Europe. And the Germans are their descendants. The Germans, the Norwegians, and the Swedish people are all of the House of Israel. And that's why Olaf Jansen's father spoke about their ancestors being the chosen ones that went into the North Countries, and that their gods were Odin and Thor, who were the leaders of the Lost Tribes that were left behind when the chosen ones went into the North Countries. And just like some people, like the Indians, they worship their ancestors, or the Jews, they worship, well, not so much they venerate their ancestors like Abraham. And yeah, well, this Reinhold Schmidt, he was taken on several rides, and one of them was to the Hollow Earth. He was picked up in California, where he lived, by the flying saucer people. And it wasn't a flying saucer, it was kind of oblong. But they flew him up into the Arctic. He says they went through the big hole in the Arctic Ocean. He saw the horizon dip and then right itself as they went through the hole. He saw that the inner Earth has a sun, and he was taken on an excursion, aerial excursion of the cities of the Hollow Earth for about 5 days, and then he was brought back to California. So
Wow.
we have people that have been to the Hollow Earth. That's not what Orthodox scientists can tell you. They have no one that has been to the core of the Earth. Of course, they'll say, "Oh, well, it's full of molten lava. How are we going to get through it?" But that's all a bunch of a big story, because every time there is a large earthquake, even the scientists themselves say that the Earth rings like a bell. And what shape does a bell have? It's not full of molten lava. It's hollow. And the moon rang like a bell when we put seismographs on the moon. And the sun, even the sun. There's this website by Michael Mazzini called the solid surface of the sun. You can go to it. And with the satellites that they have now that observe the sun, he was able to determine that the sun has a solid surface. And one of the satellites took a video of a sunquake that happened on the surface of the sun. At that location, the sun was covered by some kind of liquid. He believes is liquid silicon. But a sunquake happened, and it caused like a tsunami wave to go out in all directions from the center. And you can see how the wave went over a mountain on the surface of the sun. And another satellite has taken in the wavelength of iron and calcium and those hard minerals, the surface of the sun, showing that the surface of the sun has the valleys and mountains all the way from the North Pole to the South Pole of the sun. And they all move at the same rate around the sun. So I asked him, well, now that you can see the solid surface of the sun and can see how fast the surface is moving, how long does it take for the sun to rotate once? And he said 27.3 days. And you know that our moon rotates exactly 27.3 days also as it goes around the earth. What a coincidence is that? I don't think that's a coincidence. I believe that is an evidence that there is a creator, that he has created all these planets to be inhabited by his sons and daughters, and that they're all home. And ours is the only one that we live on the surface. We're the only one that's at a certain distance from the sun where it's warm enough or cool enough on the surface or we can live. And all the stories about the scientists come up about the moon being uninhabited is all false. Because I have 5 witnesses of that alien base on the far side of the moon. It was Howard Mentor that was taken by a flying saucer from Venus. It was one of the expert witnesses of Stephen Greer that went into an NSA facility, that's the National Security Agency facility, in 1965. And he was shown by the technician photographs they had just got back from the lunar orbiter showing the alien base on the far side of the moon. And then it was written by Colonel, what's his name? I forget all of a sudden. It was a guy that wrote a book the day after Roswell that he mentions that he was an intelligence officer for the United States government during and after World War II. And he helped a general in the Pentagon take parts of that flying saucer that was crashed in Roswell and put it out into industry. And they have been able to reverse engineer some of the alien technology.
Sorry, was his name Colonel Philip Corso?
Colonel Philip. Colonel, say it again.
Colonel Philip Corso?
Yeah, Philip Corso. Philip Corso. He testified that we discovered that there was an alien base on the far side of the moon. Colonel Corso saw one of those aliens that was captured that died in the crash of the flying saucer at Roswell, New Mexico. He was stationed at Fort Riley, and when they brought the caskets through, and he was able to see one of those. And he also was privileged as an intelligence officer to see the reports from the funeral examiners, in which they said that this alien was chlorophyll based. It didn't have blood like we do, but chlorophyll is plant blood, okay? The only difference between chlorophyll and our blood is that chlorophyll has a central atom of magnesium, and ours has a central atom of iron. That's the only difference between them. And these aliens, these people of other worlds, have been able to build these androids and fly their craft so that they don't endanger their own lives. They come here to prevent us from having nuclear war, right?
That's interesting.
And they built these androids with chlorophyll base instead of blood. He said that the autopsy report said that they have no sexual organs, they have no vocal organs, they have no digestive organs, they have like two brains in which they have a human type brain and another one like a computer that interfaces with their craft. And so all they have to do is think where they want to go, and with their fingers also, they have communication with their craft with the ends of their fingers to make their craft go where they want it to go. So
So
it's very interesting about Colonel Corso, what he found. And also there was another witness, and his name was, he wrote the book Penetration. He was a psychic. What was his name? So his name was, anyway, I can tell you his story and how he was a psychic. Ingo Swan is his name. Now, Ingo Swan, he was a fantastic psychic. And he was taken underground by a guy named Axelrod near some underground base near Washington, D.C., and given some coordinates to remote view is what they call it, looking where psychics can look sometime in space, any place in time or space, they can look to see what's there. So he was given coordinates of this alien base on the far side of the moon without telling him that there is an alien base on the far side of the moon for him to psychically explore it. So he psychically goes to that coordinate on the far side of the moon and he says, "Oh, you have been keeping this secret from the whole world? There's an alien base on the far side of the moon. I have just seen it." He even saw places on the far side of the moon where they were mining these exotic rocks that are on the moon, right? So that's the fifth person that independently knew and found out that there is an alien base on the far side of the moon. That the moon is hollow. That the alien base houses the people that visit there from all the planets in our solar system, that testify to Howard Menger that they live in all the planets. Now, I don't think even they told him that the planets were hollow. But in 1959, a spacecraft landed outside the Pentagon, piloted by a guy named Valiant Thor from Venus. And he waved down a couple of policemen and asked to be taken to our president, that he had a message for him. So they took him to the Pentagon and they took him to the White House, and he met with Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon. And he handed them this book. He says, "We, the people of Venus, are giving a gift to you, people of Earth. In this book are instructions how we people of Venus can help you, your people, eliminate all poverty, sickness, and even death." And Eisenhower, after studying it with his advisors for 1 year, returned it and said, "I'm sorry, we can't accept your offer because my advisors say it would destroy our economy. They make so much money off of poverty, sickness, and death that he didn't want their help. We could all be flying around in flying saucers by now. We could all be healthy, living 100,000-year lives with no sickness and death." Since the 50s, when Valiant Thor visited President Eisenhower and Nixon in the White House.
Wow.
And we learned about this not from our government. They keep this all hidden and secret from the people. We the people that elect our officers. Why are they keeping secrets from us? because they do what the Federal Reserve that is owned by mostly stockholders from Europe, that the bankers rule this world. And it's not just the bankers, it's people that they work for. In 1776, Jesuit priest Adam Weishaupt organized the Order of the Illuminati in Bavaria, Germany. And then that order was, their goal was to take over the whole world by bringing in the richest people of the world and to control the world. So they have pretty much done that. You know, they control the world. The Jesuits are the head honchos of the world. Even the Pope of Rome is a Jesuit priest now. So they don't want us to believe that peaceful people live in the hollow earth and other planets. They want everybody to believe that the evolution, that the God doesn't even exist, that all beautiful life and all intricacies of life and plants and symbiotic living together, and that the moon rotates the same speed as the sun, all happened by chance, okay? And it was done by gravity. Stephen Hawkins, a physicist of the UK, says gravity did it. Well, who controls gravity? Well, God controls gravity. So God's the one that did it. So they don't want us believing that. Why? Because they're Luciferians. They worship Satan. They don't tell everybody that. They say, oh, we worship Jesus, but that's not true. I've seen the Catholic priest on YouTube praising Lucifer, saying that Jesus is the son of Lucifer, the son of the morning. In Latin, of course, and most people don't understand it, right? So the Catholic Church is not the true Church of Jesus Christ. It was stolen. It was stolen by one of the members of Jesus' original church when he was here on earth. His name was Peter Magus. Peter Magus was a worshiper of the Babylonian mystery religion. And when he joined the church, his purpose wasn't to be a good saint follower of Jesus. He wanted to steal the teachings of Jesus. He wanted to even offer Peter money to buy the priesthood. And Peter said, your money is going to die with you because you're not buying this priesthood. We're not giving it to you. But he went to Rome. He founded his own church called the True Church. That's what Catholic means, the true church. But it was not founded by Peter the Apostle. That's a big lie. It was founded by Peter Magus, who tried to buy the priesthood from Peter. Peter never went to Rome. He died somewhere there in Palestine.
Wow.
They control the world, right?
Yeah.
They all the countries of the world pay tithing to the Vatican. The Vatican is like its own country inside of Italy. They have a great big old wall, and they have their own government, and all the countries pay honor and tithing to the Pope of Rome.
Yeah, that's
The
true.
Bible calls it what? The great and abominable church of Satan, the mother of harlots. But where's God? Where's God's church? It was taken to the hollow earth in Revelation chapter 12. It says it went through the woman. It talks about the woman, the church, right? It was given the wings of and taken through the mouth of the earth into the hollow of the bowels of the earth. And they were to be there for 2,500 years, which is about up. I expect them to start coming forth next year. The 2,500 years are up, are almost up. And they will expand the political kingdom of God to outer earth. And we will once more be ruled by the Prince of Peace, Jesus, the creator of heaven and earth. The scriptures talk about this, the hollow earth all the way through. People just don't recognize it.
No, I've
In
never
the
recognized it.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, singular. There's two parts to this earth. Okay, one is the heaven and one is the earth. Another name for heaven is paradise, where the spirits of the righteous go at death. It's the inner sun. Jesus told his apostles, the Pharisees, where heaven was, where paradise was. To the thief on the cross, he says, "Today you shall be with me in paradise." Not to stay, of course, but to be judged. But he previously told the Pharisees that even as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, even so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And then there's a second scripture to back that up. And that's Ephesians chapter 8, where it says, chapter 4, verse 8. Ephesians, it says, before Christ was resurrected and went into heaven, he first went into the lower parts of the earth. When his body was dead in the tomb, his spirit went into the lower parts of the earth, to the heart of the earth, which is called paradise. And it's the heaven of this earth. So the earth, what does the scripture say? On the first day, God said, "Let there be light." That was the inner sun when it was lit up. Then God divided it between his day and night sides. Olaf Jansen testified in his book, The Smoky God, which he is what he called the inner sun, because it looks smoky on the dark side of the sun and has a bright white cloud on the daylight side. And it rotates, but very slowly, once about every 700 years. Originally 1,000 years, but now it's about 700 years because the earth has been pulled away farther from the sun by a giant planet-sized comet that came by the earth at the time of Noah's flood and tipped the earth on its axis and sloshed that water out from the hollow earth ocean out onto the surface, creating the flood that covered the whole surface of the planet. At that time, there were no mountains. All the geologists recognize that the mountains are all young, okay? They were all created since the flood of Noah. So we have the scriptures that also indicate that the earth is hollow. That on the second day, God created the firmament, okay? What's the firmament? The firmament is called an expanse. Expanse is a hollow. It's the hollow in the earth, okay? On the first day, the light lit up with the inner sun, and it was created in this expanse, which is the hollow of the earth. Then the earth was the continent. The continent was brought up out of the waters. God had put waters on the earth at the very first, before he lit up the inner sun. So he caused the waters to come out. And in Psalms, you can read in chapter 136, I think, it says that God caused the earth to come out of the waters. That it caused the earth to come out of the waters. And where did he cause it to come out of? Above the firmament. Because below the firmament, he gathered the waters. So above the inner sun was where the inner continent was brought out of the waters on the other side of the hollow. And then the plant life was planted, okay, on the third day, when they had sunlight from the inner sun. Then on the fourth day, the Earth was put in orbit around the sun. There's a geologist that thinks that the moon was originally in this orbit around the sun, because when they went to the moon, brought back rocks, they found out they were much older than the Earth. That the moon is older than the Earth. So the moon originally had this orbit around the sun, and then the gods brought the Earth and put it in the same orbit so that the moon started going around the Earth. And one evidence of that is that the moon is nearly in the same plane that the Earth goes around the sun. And instead of being, see, the Earth is tipped on its axis 23.5 degrees, right? So instead of the moon going around the equator like this, it doesn't. It goes in the same plane that the Earth goes around the sun. It's only off about 5 degrees. And that was probably caused because when the Earth was pulled away from the sun at the time of the flood, when this comet-sized planet came by the Earth and tipped the Earth on its axis, sloshed water out from the hollow Earth to the outer Earth, causing the flood, the Earth was baptized, okay? And it was pulled farther away from the sun. And so then now we have 365 days in a year, whereas on the ruins of Tiwanaku, in the tops of the Andes Mountains in Bolivia, these huge stones built by the antediluvians who had anti-gravity technology, on the gate of their ruins is this calendar of the sun, which shows that the Earth originally had an inclination of 16 degrees, whereas now has 23.5. So this astronomer in Australia named Dodwell, he looked up all these ancient astronomer glyphs that or monuments that were created by ancient astronomers down through history. He discovered that in 2234 BC, the Earth was suddenly tipped on its axis over to 26 degrees by a planet-sized comet, and it has gradually come back to 23.5 now. So when this planet-sized comet came by the Earth, not only did it tip it, but it also pulled it out of its orbit farther away from the sun to 365 days a year, because on the calendar of Tiwanaku, one calendar year at that time was 290 days. We were closer to the sun before. We had more cloud cover. We had a more even climate over all the surface of the planet, which is the reason why we find coal deposits in Antarctica and in the Arctic. They had pine trees, they had palm trees in Antarctica they found buried under the ice. And recently they have discovered under the ice a base of aliens that had landed on the Earth. And were covered by the ice of the flood. When we were pulled farther away from the sun, it created an ice age, okay, because of the flood. The Earth was cooled off, and the polar ice formed, and we still have a lot of ice at the poles. In Antarctica, it's almost 3 miles deep. In Greenland, it's almost 2 point something miles deep. The one over Greenland, that's one evidence of the Hideko River. There's a there's a jet stream that goes over out of the Arctic and flows over Greenland from the Hideko Valley inside the Hollow Earth. And it drops all that moist air coming out of the polar opening onto the Greenland ice pack. Say, what if that jet stream was flowing over Alaska instead of over Greenland? Well, Alaska would be under 2.5 miles deep of ice today. But that's the reason why we have so much ice on Greenland, because all that ice and snow comes from the hollow earth, from moist air coming out of the polar opening, following that jet stream across the Arctic and falling on the Greenland ice cap. Same for Antarctica. The moist water coming up out of the South Pole opening falls on the Antarctic continent. The depth's almost 3 miles deep.
So is the Earth then shaped as a ball or more like a donut if it's
right,
circulating through like that?
More like a donut.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you look out in space and you can find what they call hollow nebulas. They have a central star and they have like a shell around it. Well, that's the way our planet is. It has a central star and it has a shell of the planet around it. It's about 800 miles thick from the outside to the inside surface. And I had to come up with a new theory of gravity to explain how they have gravity on the inner surface. But it's supported by Isaac Newton, who is the father of gravity. My theory is that in the nucleus of all atoms is taking the ether of space, which scientists claim doesn't exist, but does, and concentrates it down to gyroscopic spinning balls of ether that then become part of the magnetic field of the atom, what they call the flux of the atom. And it's shot out by the nucleus through the south polar opening of the atom. Atoms are hollow, just like the Earth is hollow, like all the planets, and everything in space is hollow, even asteroids. And it goes out, and as it's going out, what happens when it creates this gyroscopic particle in the nucleus of the atom? It concentrates the ether down into a spinning ball that is spinning at the speed of light, and then is ejected out at the speed of light out the south polar opening, is met by incoming ether, because as the gyroscopic particles are created in the nucleus, it takes the gas. The ether is a spiritual gas that fills the universe, okay? And it is concentrated down in these gyroscopic particles that take up less space than the ether gas. It creates, when it does it, it creates a vacuum in the ether, in the nucleus of the atom, and the ether gas all around rushes in to fill that vacuum in the nucleus of the atom. So as these gyroscopic particles come out in the magnetic field of the atom, they're met by inflowing ether that keeps them in that same orbit, in and out of the atom. Same for the electrons that go in a more or less horizontal direction. The ether coming in keeps those electrons spinning it around by centrifugal force. They go push out against the ether, and the ether pushes in, and it keeps them in orbit, just like the moon is in orbit around the Earth. And Howard Menger, when he wrote his book, he has a diagram of how he thinks that the tides of the Earth are created by the ether. The moon blocks some of the ether flowing into the Earth. Beneath the moon is where the tides rise. So the ether doesn't push as hard on the tides on the surface of the ocean, so it rises. There's a little vacuum between us and the moon that causes the tides to rise. Every time the moon comes up, the tides come up, right? So we know that the tides are caused by the moon, but it's because the ether flowing into the moon is blocked somewhat by the inflowing ether, and it causes a little vacuum between the moon and the surface of the planet and causes the oceans to rise.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, is the opening of the Earth, is it only in the North and South poles, or can you get to it in different areas of the world?
You can enter in through caverns, but the Earth is,
Caverns.
like you say, a donut shape
Mhm.
instead of sphere and then a solid rock. It's more a donut. It's more like the shape of a magnet. Okay, it has holes at the poles, and the magnetic flux goes like this into the center and comes out to the South Pole. Now, the polar openings are not exactly at the poles, which they would have been if the Earth was still in its same orientation as when it was created. It has been tipped on its side for about 5 degrees. So the polar opening is off 5 degrees towards the Russian side of the pole. You go from Spitsbergen over the pole into the polar opening. Or you can go exactly north of the Franz Josef lands and go into the polar opening at 85 degrees north, 130 degrees east. And then on the South Pole, you also have the polar opening. It's 85 degrees south, not at the pole. We have a base at the pole. But at the 85 degrees is where the location of the polar opening is. And I think it's 50 degrees west. It's just exactly opposite of the North Pole opening. And there are caverns and openings to the inner Earth. We met Hank Crossman and spoke to him. Hank Crossman went to NAU, Northern Arizona University, and he heard about the Hopei Indians having an entrance near the Grand Canyon where the Little Colorado River empties into the Grand Canyon. They call it a Sipapu, where it's an entrance to the Hollow Earth. And he went to the Tuba City and asked the Hopi Council of Nine for permission to go to the Hollow Earth. And they gave him permission. They said, a young man, a Hopi man will meet you this semester at NAU, and he will take you there. So that semester, this young man walks up. He says his name was Kapovi. He was a great grandson of Jacob Waltz. Jacob Waltz was a man from Holland that immigrated to Arizona around the turn of the century, 1900, around there. And he lived near Apache Junction, and the Pima Indians live over there. And the Pima Indians know about this city of people that live inside the earth crust, about 3 miles beneath the Superstition Mountain. And they have a cavern entrance that goes down to their city there. And they asked the Indians if they would send somebody with pack animals with salt, because they didn't have any salt, but they would pay him in bricks of gold. So they asked this Jacob Waltz if he would go. And he wasn't afraid to go down there. The Indians are afraid of the evil spirits in the earth. So he took these pack animals, loaded them up with salt, and they showed him the entrance. Now the entrance of these openings that go to the places that down in the earth that are inhabited are covered by a holographic image that looks like the side of the mountain. They spray a field of iodine crystals across it, and then they project onto these iodine crystals an image that looks like the side of the mountain. When you go up to it and look at it, and it looks like the side of the mountain, you can't tell if there's an entrance there, but you can just walk right through it. So he would take his pack animals and go down there. And this Billy Woodard, he was out there visiting with his step parents in Apache Junction when a Pima elder asked him if he would like to go for a walk on Superstition Mountain. And they go up, way up on the east side of the mountain, way up this canyon. He says, wait right here. He goes up farther to see if, and came back and says, all is clear. Nobody's here. let's just go. And they walk up to this cavern entrance. It looks like the side of the mountain, but you can just walk right through. Well, they walk right through. They had their flashlights. The Pima elder took him to the room where Jacob Waltz would store his gold. There were bricks of gold that were 4 inches by 4 inches by 4 inches. And he saw that gold stash of Jacob Waltz. Well, in his old age, Jacob Waltz married a Hopi girl, and that's how this came to pass. This clan of the Hopei Indians called the Waltz clan, and Hopei was part of this clan. And he told our friend his name slipped my mind. But it's right there on my homepage, ourhollowEarth.com. And you can learn all about his story. So his name is Hank Crossman. Yeah. Hank Crossman, he graduated from NAU. He went to Los Angeles, became an attorney that dealt in land, I think. I'm not exactly sure. Properties that he worked. But he was taken by a Hopei to this cavern entrance in the Little Colorado River. And they hired a couple of pack animals from, I think, Cameron, where the highway passes on the way to Page. And they're in the Indian reservation. And he blindfolded them. He said that the Council of Nine demanded that he blindfold Hank Crossman, but that was their condition, right? That he could go the whole world, but he had to be blindfolded. And so that he could hear the rocks falling off the trail as they were going along this trail way into the afternoon. Finally, he stops. And Hopei says, you can get off your animal and come over here to the canyon wall and put your hand on the canyon wall. So he goes over there and he puts his hand on the canyon wall and it goes into the wall. And you can't see his hand. He pulls it out. His hand's okay. He puts it back in. He doesn't feel anything, but he can't see his hand. And Hopei says, we cover the cavern. There's a cavern here. And we just cover it with a holographic image that looks like this side of the mountain. And so we can just walk right through it. So they walk right through it. This cavern's all lit up with electric lights. They get in an anti-gravity vehicle inside and go flying down through the cavern to just below the surface of the hollow earth, inner surface. And they come into this room that has 12 doors. And Hopei goes up to one of the doors and puts his hand and it opens. And Crossman says, what if I go, what are all these other doors for? He says, well, if anybody gets down this far, they won't know which door to go in. And you don't want to go through the wrong door. He didn't tell him what was there, but it could be some kind of meat-eating dinosaur, or alligator. So they walk up these stairs to the inner surface. They get in this hovercraft, anti-gravity craft that the Hopis have in the hollow earth, and fly to a city of the hollow earth Hopis. They had, on the account, they give a name for this city, but I can't remember what it is. You can read this account. But it's right there on my website. The story was an interview that Hollow Earth researcher Dennis Crenshaw made with Hank Crossman several years ago. So we were planning on doing an expedition to our Hollow Earth. I was contacted by Steve Curry of Provo, Utah. He had gone down the Zompel Gorge, he was taking people um, river rafting all around the world, and the Tibetan guide says behind this falls there's a hidden cavern that goes to Garta. Garta is their name for the hollow earth, or a big cavern down in there. I'm not exactly sure which, but I kind of think it was the hollow earth that their cavern in Tibet goes to the hollow earth. So coming back to the States, he looks up on the internet and finds my website, and he calls me up and says, I'd like you to help me put on an expedition to our hollow earth. So we go through all the ideas of how to do it, and we finally come up with the idea of renting a nuclear icebreaker from the Russians to take tourists to the North Pole every year, right? And instead go through the North Pole opening to visit our hollow earth. Well, we had just about enough people signed up when he got brain cancer and died in 2006. So it was canceled, but I got to know some of the expedition members. One of them was BK from Denver, Colorado, and he would love to go around and interview some of these people that would contact me. And one of these was Hank Crossman. He went to California. He interviewed Hank Crossman, and Hank told him the whole story of how he went to the hollow earth through this cavern in the Colorado River near the Grand Canyon with the Hopei Indians. And he got there, and he fell in love with one of these Hopei Indian girls. He says the women of the hollow earth were so beautiful that any man couldn't help falling in love with them. But he said, Kapovi, I'd like to marry this girl, but I'd like to go back to get my personal belongings at Flagstaff before I get married. Would that be possible? He said, sure. So he takes him back out, blindfolds him out to the Cavern location. And he goes to Flagstaff, gets his personal belongings, and he says, but Kapovi, when I come back from Flagstaff, how am I going to know where the entrance is? You blindfolded me. He says, don't worry about it. Just come to this point and yell out my name and I'll come for you. So he goes to that one point and yells and yells and yells, and Kapovi never comes back. And about that point in the interview, tears started streaming down his face. He couldn't go back and marry the love of his life. And he didn't get to go back to the hollow earth because he didn't recognize what great privilege it was to go to the hollow earth. Not everybody is allowed to go just anytime they want and return any time they want. You go there, it's a paradise. If you make it there, you probably want to stay instead of coming back. But we wouldn't know this if he hadn't come back. So we're going to be grateful for that he went and came back to tell us the story of what it's like.
That's incredible. Do you still have dreams of trying to get to the center of the earth? Have you given up?
Well, I have always wanted to go to the hollow earth if possible, but people ask me if I have tried to go to the hollow earth. I have never really tried to go, except that I wanted to learn more about it to see if it was true. My main objective has been to find enough evidence from scripture, from history, from science, whether the hollow earth theory could be possible or if it is false or not. One interviewer asked me, well, how could one prove that the earth is not hollow? And I said, well, you could drill a hole to the hollow earth. And, if the earth is not hollow, you wouldn't find it was hollow. But if you if it is, you would find that it is hollow, and it could, if you made the hole big enough that you could put an elevator in, people would pay to go, even if the hollow earth people wouldn't let us immigrate to the hollow earth. At least they could go down to the central sphere of gravity. The central sphere of gravity is not in the center of the earth like Orthodox scientists claim. It's halfway through, or well, it's between the outer surface and the inner surface. As you're going down into the surface of the planet, you will weigh less and less and less and less until you get to the central sphere of gravity, where you weigh nothing. And then as you go past the central sphere of gravity, you start feeling the gravity from the other side, because gravity is not a pull. I have the two scientific experiments given to me by a guy that wrote the book, The Theory of Everything, I think it is. And he proposed he proposed two experiments that anybody can carry out to show that gravity is not a pull or attraction by the earth. The first one is to take one of those springs, you know, that you used to could just drop and it would bounce around on the ground. It has a whole bunch of rounds, you know, all the way down, and hang it. You just hang it up here. Well, when you hang it up, if the earth was if gravity was an attraction by the earth, all the springs levels would be equally spaced apart, because the earth would be pulling on the bottom, and the beam up here would be pulling on the top. But in the actual experiment, you hang it up there, and the rings at the bottom are all bunched together, where the ones at the top are sprung farther apart, okay? And the reason why they're farther apart at the top than at the bottom is because the ether, as it's flowing into the earth, it hits each successive ring and pushes on it harder and harder, and lengthens out the springs that are at the top. The other experiment is to take two weights, exactly the same weight, and hang them on a rubber band. Okay, you connect them on a rubber band between them. Then you hang it on this same crossbar up here, and you measure how far apart they hang apart. Then you let them go. When you let them go, if the gravity is an attraction, they will stay the same distance apart all the way down to the ground. But when in the actual experiment you let them go, they come together a little bit as they go down. The distance between them decreases. Why does it decrease? It's because as the bottom one's going through the ether, it is resisted by the ether somewhat, causing it to slow down. And it causes also the one at the top to have a little bit less ether hitting it as it's going down. And so it causes them to draw together as they fall towards the ground.
That's
And
interesting.
I also have the quote from Isaac Newton saying that he would rather the scientists not ascribe to him the attraction theory of gravity, because he believed in the ether. Mm-hmm. And
That's
that
really
the gravity is caused by a concentration of the ether in the nucleus of the atom, and is causing a flow in the ether. So as ether is flowing into the sun, it presses on the earth, okay, and that keeps the earth going around the sun. Scientists, Orthodox scientists, say that the earth is falling into the sun, that the sun is attracting, is pulling on the sun. It is not. The earth is being pushed towards the sun. whenever there's a star on the far side of the sun, you can see it. You can see the beam of light if it's just on the very if it's just on the far side of the edge of the sun, because the gravity flowing into the sun bends that beam of light as it's going around the sun. And that allows you to see a star on the far side of the disk of the sun that you wouldn't normally be able to see because it's a straight line of sight. Would not let you see it, but because the gravity flowing into the sun bends the beam of light, is
Wow.
why you can see that beam of light, that star.
That's
So
pretty
the
cool.
ether of space does exist. There's a scientist named James DeMail who wrote a book, the ether. I forget exactly the name of the book, but he showed how the Michael Somorti experiment in 1890 or sometime that did not have a null zero effect of detecting the ether. They just claimed it was within the range of error of the experiment. But they only had 6 turns or 8 turns of the interferometer in their experiment. Whereas Dayton Miller, who was head of the Scientific Society of the United States, carried on those same experiments of the interferometer for 25 years afterwards with Edward Morley, who was with Michelson in that experiment, and proved conclusively that the ether of space, it does exist, that there is a wind of ether wind blowing past the Earth, and it pushes on the Earth towards the star Vega. The whole solar system is going towards the star Vega. It goes in a helix format, and it's towards the north of the Earth. And it's the ether flowing into the big giant stars in the center of our galaxy that keeps our solar system in an orbit that goes around the center of the galaxy, just like our Earth goes around the sun.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. That's really interesting. But before we wrap up, Rodney, could you tell our listeners where we can find your work and how do we stay updated with your latest research?
Yeah. Well, I keep my website active. It's called ourhollowearth.com, where I have a link there. You can buy my book at Amazon. Also have it available on Amazon as an ebook, as well as several different formats on my website for iPad and an iPhone that you can download for a reasonable fee. But I was going to explain further a second about the gravity, that I had to come up with a new theory of gravity to explain the hollow Earth, how people are living on the inner surface of the planet. Because as you go to college, they teach you the hollow Earth theorem, which says that everything inside a hollow Earth, there would be zero gravity. So if there was any people living there, they would be floating around according to Orthodox scientists. Okay, but we have witnesses, dozens of them, that have been to the hollow Earth and come back to say that the people that live there, the animals that live there, all have a surface gravity where their feet are firmly planted on the ground as ours are on the outer surface of the planet. Same going through the polar opening. How do you explain that? Well, Orthodox science says that center of gravity is in the center of the Earth. All the oceans of the Earth would be pouring into that hole, into the center of gravity. Well, the truth is there is a small center of gravity in the inner sun, but most of the center of gravity that affects us is in the shell of the planet. And it's halfway or a little bit past halfway in the shell of the planet, so that ether flowing into the outer surface keeps our feet firmly planted on the ground. and ether flowing into the inner surface from the inside keeps the inner people with their feet firmly centered on the ground.
Wow.
The thing about the ether theory is the reason why it's been kept secret is because there was a man, inventor named Nikola Tesla, at the turn of the century was wanting to build this huge tower and provide free electricity to the whole world, where you take your phone or your appliance and you just plug it into the ground and have an antenna on your house, and then you would have a free electricity to run all your apparatuses. But his banker was J.P. Morgan, and he says, I bought all of this copper wire, ready to put all these lines across the United States that Nikola Tesla discovered how to transmit electricity far distances with alternating current. And he didn't want to lose all his investment on his copper wire. So he cut all the funding for Nikola Tesla. I think he actually financed the changes in our textbooks to say that there's no ether, that it doesn't exist. But that you see, with the ether, Nikola Tesla believed the ether exists. It was Einstein that came up with a theory that the ether doesn't exist, with his relativity theory that space is curved. Well, why is it curved? It's the only reason why space is curved is because there's ether. They're curving space, as it pushes on the planets that are orbiting the sun. Before he died, he changed his mind, but he wasn't able to publicize that. So
Interesting.
the thing about the ether is that it has been suppressed. The theory of the
Definitely.
ether has been suppressed.
Yeah.
Because the ether is the basis of flying saucer technology. Flying saucer technology is the basis of free energy generation. Anti-gravity control is based on the ether theory, because you can control the ether with electrostatic forces, and that's how flying saucers work. They put a positive charge on one side of their craft and a negative on the other side. The ether rushes towards the nucleuses of all the atoms in that positive side and pushes the craft through space. So the theory of the ether theory of gravity would give us all free electricity, flying vehicles with an automobile with no gas. You wouldn't have to pay for fuel ever again, and you could power your home with air conditioning and everything with free energy that God has provided for everybody. But these bankers have set it up so that we're all enslaved to their banking system. We're all in debt to their debt monetary system. And they've kept secret all these fabulous inventions where we wouldn't have to be working so hard if we had free energy generation.
That's true. That certainly is paradise if we didn't have to do that and we lived a better way. That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure.
Stephen Greer is in Washington trying to bring this out, the secrecy that they have placed on the generation of electricity with free energy using the ether of space. But who knows if he'll ever be successful in it until the peace arrives and establish his government of the political kingdom of God, is what I look forward to.
Yeah.
As a firm believer in the Creator, Jesus Christ, the Creator of heaven and earth. And
Yeah.
all that are in therein, even the evolutionists and the atheists were created by God, even though they don't believe in them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Was an amazing conversation. I want to extend my deepest gratitude for taking the time to share your incredible knowledge and insights with us today. Your research and dedication to exploring the mysteries of our world, particularly the hollow earth and ethel theory, has been certainly given us a lot to think about, for sure. It's been a fascinating journey uh, into the unknown with you, and I'm sure our listeners will be eager to delve deeper into your work.
Well,
Thank
appreciate
you.
being on your podcast. Wish you all
Yes.
the best in Hawaii. Enjoy the
Yes.
wonderful weather there.
Yeah, we're having a storm. I guess two tropical storms, a hurricane that became a tropical storm. So usually it's blue outside, right back over here, but it's kind of gray today because of this overcast that we're having.
Mhm.
But yeah, um, I can't wait for your book to come out. The new book, The Moon, The Hollow Moon.
The Hollow Moon, yeah,
Yeah, when is that coming out?
probably next year. I've
Okay.
been working on it and hopefully have it available.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to have you come back to talk about that.
Yeah, the moon is hollow and inhabited
That's incredible.
by
Yeah.
peaceful people. We warmed off the moon. Neil Armstrong, the first man to step on the moon, told a graduating class at the university where he taught that we were warmed off the moon. And we have the testimony of Ken Johnson, who was a lab manager, lab manager of NASA when he was called in to show a film that was taken by astronaut Collins of Apollo 11 when he went on the far side of the moon, while Neil Armstrong was walking on this side of the moon. It was dark on the far side of the moon, but he took a film of that alien base with lights shining out through the windows. And these people came to his office, and his boss told him to show him that video on the far side of the moon. And later, after he had put the video up and they had gone, a day or so later, he took it out and looked at it again, and it was gone. They had taken it out.
I
And
believe that.
Ken Johnson, he said that Apollo 17, we had several more Apollo missions to go to the moon that were canceled. But Apollo 17 was the last Apollo mission to the moon. As it was going around the far side of the moon, it was dark at that time because it has light. It has light once every 27.3 days. It has dark half of the time and light half of the time. It's not the dark side of the moon like some people claim. It's the far side of the moon because they do have a daylight. When Apollo 17 was going around the moon on the last time before they came back to Earth, that alien base all lit up with bright lights, okay? And over the radio came this message to our Apollo mission. You people of Earth are not welcome here on the moon. Go back to Earth and never come back. And that's because we tried. There's Stephen Greer's one of generals of this Stephen Greer witnesses. You can watch his video on this disclosureproject.org website. Said that we tried to send a nuclear missile to blow up on the moon. How stupid is that? Us sending nuclear missiles to other worlds to blow up on their world? They weren't going to allow this. There's the also the French scientist that designed all of our communication system for NASA, wrote a book, and he says all of our missions, all our Apollo flights to the moon were followed by UFOs. There were 2 UFOs standing up above, up in the air, while Neil Armstrong was walking around on the moon.
Wow.
And there was a nuclear charge in Apollo 13. They disabled the Apollo 13 so it couldn't land because they wanted to blow this charge up on the surface of the moon. Nuclear charge. And that's why Apollo 13 was disabled by a UFO, he said. And that had to go around the moon and come back without landing.
Wow.
And all this, why haven't they told us this stuff?
Right. I know.
It's because we're not alone. The moons and the planets and the universe is teeming with life. And they're peaceful people. The man that came from Venus, Val Thor, he told Dr. Frank Strange's, a minister, he told him that we live inside of Venus. Venus is hollow. It's like your Earth is hollow. And we don't even know about it.
Right. That's true. We don't. Thank you so much, Rodney. I really appreciate your time and for also being so generous with your expertise. I really look forward to hearing more about your future discoveries.
All right. You're so welcome. And,
Thank you.
Have a nice Hawaiian day.
And that brings us to an end of another episode. I want to give a huge thanks to Rodney for sharing his incredible knowledge and insights into the hollow earth theory. Remember, the views shared by my guests are not necessarily my own. Here we aim to bring diverse voices and perspectives so you can explore, question, and do your own research. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We'd love for you to share this episode with your friends. And if you've enjoyed this show, please consider supporting us on Patreon for some awesome perks. Mahalo nui loa, guys, and until the next time, stay safe, stay sensible. Ahui ho kako. Bye.
When you first told me your name, I didn't hear a word you said. Bet it was written all over my face. Should've known it was you I would love until the end. Ooh. Ooh. When you made it down the aisle, every moment stole my breath. Bet you could see it in my smile. Should've known it was you I would love until the end. I don't know where this road leads. All I know is I wanna go with you in a life where there's no sure things. I am sure I wanna live it with you. Ooh. Ooh. If you look into my eyes, when our time down here is spent, it's in every single line. Hope you know it was you that I loved until the end.